You were listening to Draw 4 Podcast. Good tidings, and thanks for joining us. My name is Joseph Dunlap. I'm executive producer of Draw 4 Podcast, and I am also a writer for MetaLink.com, and also the founder of the recent 10-Minute Magic.
Hi, I'm Zac Elsik, and I enjoy playing competitive Magic at any big event I can get my hands into. I primarily like to focus on constructed decks where I can just pull out my inner Johnny and Spike and develop something crazy.
And my name is John. I don't have many qualifications as far as the Magic sphere are concerned. I recently put up a few articles on deck building website Tapped Out. I've also recently started a podcast called Eyes on the Mise with Ian Dixon, who you might have heard on an earlier episode of the podcast. For me, I tend to play a few more casual formats and primarily play with limited Magic.
So tell us a little bit about Eyes on the Mise before we get into this.
Sure. So Eyes on the Mise was started by myself and Ian, and really it's the Magic podcast that we kind of wanted to make, where it's a lot of the podcasts want you to get better at Magic through different resources. And Ian and I figured that the best way for us to get better at Magic is to talk about Magic. And we want to talk about Magic a lot, as many Magic players do. So we wanted an outlet for that. And that's what Eyes on the Mise is. It's talking about Magic, trying to get better at Magic, talk about the different aspects of it, and help us get better by listening to you guys and just by talking.
All right, that sounds great. I've listened to some episodes. I really enjoyed what I heard. I like the rapport that you have with Ian.
Well, thank you. I like to think we get along well.
Zach, thanks for coming back to the podcast. I hope we didn't scare you off.
No, anytime.
So, actually, our first segment here is called The Upkeep. So, for those of you who have not heard an episode before or have not listened since we made that change, and it's our warm-up topic, you might say. On last episode, when we had our upkeep, we were talking to a guest named Randall, a friend of mine, and he told us about some of his latest Modern builds. And then I thought, well, how fun would that be to talk to Zach about what he's been playing in Modern lately? Zach, what are you playing in Modern right now?
Just only Eldrazi. Right now, I'm totally kidding. Why would I bother with that mess? That one seems to be a solved puzzle already, and you can play whatever color you want. I have been playing not too much Lantern Control, which is what a lot of people, I guess, would assume that I play all the time, but I get bored with the same deck, so I play many other ones. And the most recent one has been Glissa Midrange, which is a green-black deck. It functions similar to Jund, but instead of your typical stuff like Dark Confidant, it plays Glissa the Traitor, which, if you didn't know what that creature was, it's a 3-mana 3/3 first strike death touch with some sort of upside. And that's pretty good at holding off Eldrazi's.
I'm actually bringing up the list for that. I recall getting the deck list from you on that, and I was looking over that. I thought it was really interesting, because a lot of it just sort of looks like a nice mid-range deck. You've got Goyf, you've got the Ooze, you've got Kitchen Finks and Tasigur, Liliana the Veil, but from there you go Glissa the Traitor, Garruk Relentless, Dismember, Engineered Explosives, and Executioner's Capsule, which I thought was really cool.
Right, the Capsule is the best card, I'd say, particularly good in this current meta for multiple reasons. One being that it hits all of the Eldrazi's, because Eldrazi aren't black. Two, you can play it early and get it out of your hand, so a Thought-Knot Seer can't take it. Three, you can hit a Reality Smasher with it, and you don't have to suffer the downside of it.
Yeah.
And then, against a lot of decks, you'll randomly just blow off an Executioner Capsule early, and then later in the game play Glissa plus removal spell, and then you can just return the capsule back to your hand. It doesn't have to be on the same turn, you can just bring it back whenever something ends up dying with Glissa in play.
Yeah, I
Capsule
saw that.
plus Glissa sounds really, really rude to people.
Yeah. As rude as Eldrazi?
Depends.
I noticed the synergy on that, and I thought that was a really, really cool flavor there. Because the capsule, you're right, the capsule does hit the Reality Smasher, and you don't have to discard to it, and so you just kind of get it out there. And that's one of the few cards that you get out there and get a return on that's actually worth playing in Modern right now.
Right. One of the hidden upsides of this type of deck, because you could look at it like John, and you'd say, hey, Dark Confidant, that's one of those really powerful threats that you got to answer. The problem is it doesn't hold its own when the opponent's just playing creatures. Whereas if you look at Goyf or Glissa, those can block Eldrazi very well, and they more or less, or must answer threats, and Kitchen Finks and Scavenging Ooze to a degree also fit that role. So when all of your creatures are these big beefy things, they can hold their own and put up a good defense as well as a good offense. You'll notice there's also those 2 Orin Reef lands. You're like, well, why aren't those just man lands like Treetop Villages? Well, having a 4/4 Glissa that doesn't die to a Lightning Bolt or a Goyf that's always going to be bigger than their Goyfs can be a big deal.
Oh, definitely. John, what do you think about this build? Would you play this?
I don't see the build in front of me, but just from the sound of it, it sounds like a deck that I would hate to play against.
Huh.
I tend to play more fragile strategies. My modern deck of choice has been and probably will continue to be Storm. So this sounds like a deck that I don't want to really face because I feel like I would fear Thoughtseize Inquisition, the discard suite that I would be afraid of.
Oh, it's got the full suite in there, too.
Oh yeah, that's a deck that I don't want to play against. Luckily, most of the Glissa interaction is dead against me, but the rest of the deck, the Goyfs, the Scoozes, the general hate that the green-black decks bring, I am just terribly afraid of.
Well, I actually am kind of a mid-range player. Now, in Modern, I like the idea of Lantern, and it's not quite, technically mid-range, but it's got that feel to it of a combo explosion. I would definitely play this if I had the cards in front of me. The time to test it and the tournament to take it to, it actually seems like it would be a lot of fun. The synergy there of underrated cards, honestly. What else have you been playing, Zach? What was the build that you were working on when you first saw that Eldrazi was a problem?
Oh, man, are you referring to my Seance deck?
Well, there is the Seance deck we could talk about. I meant your Land Destruction Vraska deck.
Oh, yes. That land destruction deck, I couldn't remember if I brought it up in a previous episode, but it's essentially black-green land destruction, splashing red for Stone Rain and a few other things like Wrecking Ball. But having a high quantity of land destruction spells tends to put a lot of decks in Modern out of range from being able to do anything, since most Modern decks don't play that many lands. I haven't touched it in quite a while just because I've been toying with other things. I don't think it's quick enough to handle turn 2 Thought Not Seer or turn 3 Reality Smasher, and so I've kind of put it off to the side since that deck itself focused on using like Abrupt Decay to hold things off, but that's not so hot right now.
Yeah, I can see that actually. You need a lot more than that. You actually need more board presence. I've noticed that cards like Abrupt Decay and Thoughtseize are actually dipping in price right now. One thing I wanted to bring up to you, Zach, is I got on Puka Trade recently, and I've just been going nuts on there. If you could win Puka Trade, I'm probably winning. I was going through my collection of cards, trying to find what people might want, and I saw a Stone Rain, and I thought, oh, Zach would like this, because you were actually playing Stone Rain in your deck.
Oh, yeah. There's so many different arts for Stone Rain, and I like way too many of them, which is a problem.
You kind of have to pick one, don't you?
Or make multiple decks that need Stone Rain.
Well,
Stone Rain's the cards that I always forget is Modern legal, and then I see that it's in 8th edition, I go, oh yeah, I could play that if I wanted.
So, Zach, you brought up Seance. I think you really want to talk about that. So, I remember when you were first working on that deck, and you were doing Before I Got to the Polis combined with Pack Rat, and you've kind of moved away from that because of the Eldrazi. Where are you at on that?
Right, so the reason why I mentioned Seance was I do happen to have it on Magic Online, so it's pretty easy to test. And I moved away from the dirtily version of Pack Rat, Muldrifter, Fulminator Mage. All of those things are great alongside Seance, but a little time-consuming. And Fulminator isn't that good against Eldrazi, believe it or not, because they could just land the big threat, and then all you have are 2/2s. So instead I shifted to an Abzan variant, which takes advantage of Slater Wayfinder and things like Wall of Omens and Eternal Witness. So if you can imagine going turn 2 Slater Wayfinder, you get you a land, you ban a Seance, and then turn 3 Eternal Witness, you bring back a Seance, or, for example, one of your 3 Wrath of Gods, you have a pretty good game against a creature deck. The coolest part about the deck is that it plays a whole bunch of creatures, including Shriekmaw, Kitchen Finks, Restoration Angel to get more uses out of all the ones previously listed, and of course Siege Rhino. And you don't care if your creatures die to Wrath of God because you get all their effects again over time with Seance.
Wait, so Shriekmaw and Seance, Executioner's Capsule and Glissa, I think you like Doomblades without playing Doomblade.
You figured it out. It is pretty well positioned, given that it's a 2-mana removal spell that hits a lot of creatures. There aren't that many black creatures in Modern.
That is very true, actually.
Yeah. Like the ones I think of are Siege Rhino,
Yeah, and Siege Rhino, I think.
Bob, but...
Yeah. He's not that popular right now. Got anything else you've been working on, Zach?
That's about it for now. I've been watching a few other decks. kind of waiting for the meta to shift back, since a lot of the decks I enjoy playing are those that use artifacts. But since Eldrazi and Affinity are very popular, that means there are a lot of Stony Silences, which makes things like Eggs a lot less fun to play. Assuming Eggs was fun to play with in the first place.
Well, I was trying to build Lantern Control. I've been gradually getting the cards for that. But then you look at the price. I remember there was the Humph Twitch stream that you were also watching, and you said in the chat that Lantern Control currently costs $1,000. And I was just like, pull my hair out, because I've been wanting to build this deck for so long. And so I'm waiting for the new updated ban list so that maybe those prices will go down. I'm monitoring the prices left and right. The hand disruption is starting to go down. Abrupt Decay's down. But all the artifacts are ridiculous. I think the bridge is somewhere between $45 and $50 right now.
When I put it together a year ago, I think the total cost of the deck was about $600, just because it shared, Mox Opal and Glimmervoid.
Yes, I recall that being about $600, and I thought, I can build this. Not anymore, so I'll just have to wait on that. So, let's move on to this week's Mana Leak article of the week. And this is actually a video from Tolarian Community College, because the Mana Source and Tolarian Community College both also have posts that we do for them on manalink.com for exposure for both parties. The professor's latest video was very poignant and very emotional at times. It was called Magic the Gathering Lessons for Our Real Lives, a Magic Memory. That really doesn't give any indication of what it's about, though. What you're getting yourself into, really. And it's a story about some stuff he's had to go through recently. He was on a stream, and he noticed that his carpet was getting wet, and his socks were getting wet because it had been raining so much. And it kept raining, and then he had to pull up the carpet because of damage. He found wood floor underneath the carpet. He pulled up the wood floor and found a stone floor beneath that then had to be cleaned after everything had been ripped up. He had to move all his stuff, his entire studio, out of the basement up into the top floor, and he had to pack away, basically, everything he'd worked on for the past several years on his channel. He said that he was almost at the breaking point after having to put everything away, and that's when he checked Twitter and saw a tweet addressed to him and Marshall Sutcliffe from someone going to their first Grand Prix and asking for advice. Marshall had already answered the tweet and said, make sure you come away having learned something. That rang true for the professor, and he decided he was going to come out of it having learned something. I wanted to know what you guys thought about this, because he came to a breaking point where he was almost burned out from Magic entirely. I wanted to know whether you guys have ever been at a point where you were just burned out on life or Magic, and what you did to bounce back.
So when I went to college, I went and I majored in math. And I had a vague idea of what I wanted to do afterwards. And towards the end of my college career, I was like, I want to do grad school. I want to be a mathematician and get a PhD and all of that. So I went to grad school. Now, I went to grad school in a pretty unorthodox place. I went to the University of Hawaii. Being from the South, that's a very long distance to travel. And so I moved out to Hawaii, and I went through, and I was in a program over at UH. And I got to a point where the math wasn't fun anymore. I was trying to do this thing that I didn't enjoy, and that eventually led me to realize, what? I don't want to be here. I want to be back home. I want to be with my family. I want to be with my friends that I've known, and that being, that far away from everyone else who I know. Like, my nearest family member was in Nevada, and from Hawaii to Nevada is still a very, very long flight. So I decided that I wanted to move back home, kind of reorganize, refocus, and figure out what I wanted to do from there. And so if you have those times where it's just like, man, I'm burnt out, I always find it best to kind of refocus and figure out where it is that you enjoy and refocus around that.
I had taken a break from Magic a good bit while I was in college, just because of financial reasons. It was kind of hard to put together a collection and build various decks when you have to shell out a lot of money for it, or you just didn't have anything to begin with. But after a lot of downtime, I eventually decided that I wanted to more or less become a tryhard. This was around Innistrad and New Phyrexia timeline, and I wanted to go to events and try as hard as I could to win, on a competitive level. Even so much so that at the regular REL events, I would, help my opponents a little bit, just if they didn't make the right or optimal decision. I wanted all of these decisions to be made, that way it could make me a better player, constantly looking for all of this. And after, I don't know, half a year, or maybe it was 4 or 5 months of just working at it very hard, I was able to get my first Pro Tour invite, which was Pro Tour Barcelona, which was really sweet to see something like that pay off.
Yeah, I recall when I was researching for the Lantern Control article I wrote as one of my debut articles for Mana League, I saw that you had done a Pro Tour after not kind of playing for a while. You got to the Pro Tour, and what happened when you got to the Pro Tour?
Oh, I had a lot of fun. I spent so much time testing a custom block constructed Huntmaster 4-color deck. With all of the testing, I was able to fight against the various decks that were there and end up at 17th place.
Oh, wow, that's really good.
No, that's very impressive.
Especially given that a lot of people who were there, the pros or part of teams and whatnot, had figured out that Wolfir Silverheart was a good card, whereas me and my testing and my little group did not, and so that was kind of a surprise to run up against. And it turns out Bonfire of the Damned, Entreat the Angels, and Terminus, when played at maximum quantities, is typically good enough anyway.
Yeah, that does sound really good.
And then I kind of took a break from Magic up until just recently.
I hit not necessarily a breaking point, but quite a burnout point just a few years ago, just on a personal level and also in the Magic scene, because I had just gotten my master's degree in music. I spent a year teaching music appreciation at a small community college. That was a bit tough, but at least I had a teaching job just right out of graduate school. I was helping out a friend who went on maternity leave, so she recommended me to kind of be her replacement for the year. Well, for the first semester, the second semester, they gave me my own 2 classes, and then they didn't hire me back. So then I just relied on accompanying, playing for the jazz band at the college I had originally gone to, which is where I live, and just making ends meet very, very shakily. So that's when I started working at the local game store, which was 72 miles away. Just because I had connections there, I knew the people there, and they liked me, so I worked there for about 9 months, and that was because my daughter had just been born, and I needed the extra money. And I had a good time. I got back into Magic. I hadn't played for a few years, and I really started to get into it and start to find that balance between, tier 1 and making your own deck that speaks the way that you want to speak with your deck. After about 7 months of working there, the 72-mile drive started to take its toll on me. It got to where I couldn't make the trip by myself anymore without just being too lonely, so I would take my family with me each time, even though it would keep them out till 2 in the morning, having to drive home after me closing up the shop. And eventually that just took too much of a toll on me. Also, I went from the pre-release of Born of the Gods all the way to the pre-release of Journey into Nyx not playing an FNM because I was working every FNM, and my co-workers were getting to, and I was needed every Friday to do the FNMs, and so I had these decks that I was building that I had nowhere to play. So that's when I kind of hit my burnout point. I gave my 2 weeks notice because I had paid off the debts that I needed to pay off from the job. The job helped pay for. I basically cashed out of Magic a little bit. I quit the shop, quit working there. I no longer had anywhere to play because I didn't want to make that drive anymore. And I was out of Magic until I think when Khans of Tarkir came out. And that was when I kind of got refreshed and I started looking at decks I wanted to play, and Siege Rhino looked like fun, so that's when I started to get back into that. The main thing is when you hit a situation like this, when you hit your burnout point, you need to make sure you come away with something that you've learned, some way you can improve yourself rather than give up. And that's what the professor wanted to communicate in his video. That's what I'm hoping everyone listening will also learn and go and watch his video, because you'll find the link in the description of the YouTube video, SoundCloud, as well as on the article in Mana League. If you're on iTunes, just go find them on YouTube. Go find Delirium Community College and subscribe and go watch the video. Any final thoughts on that, guys?
I think we summarized it pretty well.
All right, that means we get to move on to our final thing, the community topic. Now, until Shadows over Innistrad comes out, I think the community topic's going to pretty consistently be spoiler season, because everyone's excited about Shadows over Innistrad spoilers. So we're going to go around the room, as it were, and talk about what spoilers we're most excited for. John, you get to go first because you've never been on before. You are the freshman guest, and then I'll let Zach go.
Does that mean I get a wedgie after this?
I wasn't going to tell you about it.
Darn. All right.
I was going to play an artifact that I could tap, sacrifice, and then give you a wedgie so I didn't have to target you with a spell.
So I could get a clue. Got it. All right.
Ha, get a clue. Nice.
So when I first saw the spoilers for the set, the thing that really caught my eye first off was the Delirium mechanic, because that was the first thing that we saw, exemplified by Topplegeist, Angel of Deliverance, Mindrak Demon. They're all cards that get better the crazier you are, and I just love the flavor that Delirium kind of gives us, where it's the crazier you are, the more things happen. Like if you look at Topplegeist, when he comes into play, he just boop taps something down. And then when you're crazy, it just happens all the time. And you're like, stop it, you stupid ghost. For Mindrak Demon, it's if you're not crazy, you literally can't fathom the fact that it exists. So it just keeps hitting you until you're crazy enough to accept, no, yeah, that's a thing. No, that's Larry. He's fine.
He hits you until you're delirious.
Exactly. With then moving on from there, Daring Sleuth was a card that really caught my eye. He's a 2/1 for 1 in the blue. That Joseph's probably going to love, because whenever you sack a clue, he transforms.
I love this guy so much.
Then looking back at his name, he transforms into Bearer of Overwhelming Truths, and he's got a lot of spider lanterns. And he becomes a 3/2 with prowess that whenever he hits a player, he investigates. And the big thing that caught my eye about this card is that out of all the cards in the set, this is the card that screams the most to me of the video game Bloodborne, because the art just really looks like that same aesthetic from the game.
Just that one card, not the entire set?
Not the entire set. This one card specifically screams Bloodborne to me. The rest of the cards, they have the gothic horror, the Lovecraftian horror theme, but this one specifically is just like, this is Bloodborne. If Bloodborne were a card, this would be it.
Careful when you say Lovecraftian horror, because people might think that you mean the Eldrazi are coming.
Oh, no. I have a very deep appreciation for the Eldritch horror, the Cthulhu mythos. I'm currently in a role-playing group where we're doing Call of Cthulhu. So yeah. I know that Lovecraftian horror means more than just big noodly appendages.
Sure. Big noodly appendages. I like that. What's the next card that you're excited for?
The next one is a little bit more competitive, which is not usually in my wheelhouse, but that's Sigarda. Sigarda is a house. She's a 4/5 flyer for 3 green and a white. She gives you and your human hexproof, and then you can pay 2 mana and exile a card from your graveyard to make a 1/1 human soldier. Now, why am I kind of outlining Sigarda? It's not because she's better than her old version, which is not true. Old Sigarda is so much better than this Sigarda. But in Standard, what kills her? Ultimate Price doesn't kill her. She's a gold card. Grasp of Darkness doesn't kill her. Roast can't hit her. The only card that I can think of off the top of my head that actually just straight up kills Sigarda by targeting her is Tears of Valakut, which is an uncommon from Oath of the Gatewatch. There's not a lot of cards in Standard right now that straight up kill Sigarda for an efficient amount of mana. So I would expect to see a lot of Sigarda on the Standard tables as you look around in your Standard tournaments or your Standard FNMs, because she's going to be really hard to kill.
You're right, there are not very many effects that can kill Sigarda, maybe Immolating Glare.
If you attack with her, you don't have to attack with her.
Yeah, you don't have to, but I mean, who's going to play around Immolating Glare?
Not very many people, but we'll see once. What do the blue-white X control decks look like? Because someone's going to make one, and it might be good.
Well, if they put black in, they also have access to the new version of Utter End.
The Anguished Unmaking.
Yes, and there's not very much other than those 2 cards that'll take care of it, because you're right, Roast won't touch her.
Yeah, also the new card, To the Slaughter, that makes you sack a creature or planeswalker, can't even hit her either if you leave up mana to make a human. Because if she's your only creature in play and you have 2 mana, they can't make you sack her because you're just going to make a human and sack the human instead.
That To the Slaughter card has to target a player?
I believe so. It's because it's sacrifice a creature or planeswalker.
Right, and if Sigarda gives you hexproof, well then
they can't even target you even then. What about, look at that, even better. The next one is Avacyn's Judgment. It's 1 in a red for a sorcery where it just fork bolts. You deal 2 damage distributed as you want. But it also has Madness for X in a red. And if you cast it for its Madness cost, which means you discard it, it's a Rolling Thunder. You deal X damage distributed however you want among any number of creatures or players. And the art in that card is amazing. The artist tweeted it out. And the big thing to me about this art is that it's very distinct, and it's not like a lot of the other Magic art you see. If you notice, Magic art is either digital, where it's kind of obviously CG-ish, which a lot of people don't like, and I'm not sure why, or it's more kind of painterly. It's more art like, if you look at Tooth Collector, or you look at Relentless Dead, it looks more natural, or it looks more where you can see the paint strokes. This card just looks like it's straight out of a comic book. I could totally see a full page spread of this in a comic book of Shadows over Innistrad, and see Avacyn just hurtling down at Tamio trying to save Jace.
I would read that comic book. That seems like a lot of fun. Seems like a really good story.
Yeah. And that card just looks like it's amazing. It's going to kill so many people in Limited. Speaking of killing people, just period, Kenji's spoiler, Gold Knight Castigator. This card is really bizarre. It's 2 red for an angel. It has flying. It has haste. It's a 4/9. And whenever damage is dealt to you or the angel, you double that damage.
It felt a lot like Hearthstone. Just like the card recently that was in the Hardened Scales deck, that every time someone casts a spell that it gets a counter. That's a Hearthstone card, basically. This feels like a Hearthstone card. It feels like that weapon that warriors get that doubles damage dealt to them. And it's interesting that they would say, okay, well, you get that 4/9 with flying for 4, but it's going to be a Dictate of the Twin Gods on only you, and we'll give it 9 toughness so it survives most things as well. Have fun.
In combat, it's functionally a 4/5. However, it does dodge a lot of the -X effects. And also 4 + 9 = 13. Just putting that out there.
Oh, okay. You're talking about the flavor of the 13.
That too. There's a lot of 13 floating around in the set, just like there was in the last Innistrad.
All right, Zach. What cards in Shadows over Innistrad are you most excited about?
I'll start with the ones that I'm looking forward to playing with in Standard. And these may take some time because it'll just depend on what the Standard meta looks like. But I'm kind of excited for the simple ones like Invasive Surgery, which is essentially a Dispel, but for sorceries, with the upside of surgicaling whatever sorcery you hit with it.
Yeah, that actually seemed really powerful.
Right. So I enjoy playing Control, and one of the best parts about playing Control is obviously counter magic. But there isn't that much. There aren't very many good counter spells these days, especially cheap ones. And this one costs 1. And a spell that costs 1, they can hit relevant things such as Painful Truths, which is a big deal in Control mirrors, or even board sweepers like Radiant Flames and Languish, which may or may not be a big deal, but I mean, it can hit those, and then if you do, there's a good chance that that card is gone forever because of Delirium, right? So that one excites me, and it's possible it could even see play in other formats like Legacy.
I think when you said Painful Truths, you named the number 1 card to counter in Standard.
It is the best one. I don't really know of any other one. Not many people are playing Bring to Light, so...
Well, now people are going to have to decide how many Dispels versus the surgical card that you're going to want in your sideboard.
Right. Another one that I'm excited about is the Archangel Avacyn, which she looks like a Sarah Angel and or a Resto Angel, in that she gives you the utility of flashing in and then doing some cool tricks. Depending on the deck, I can imagine these tricks being very, very powerful, specifically flashing in, making your team indestructible. And then she just kind of beats for 4 every turn while having Vigilance. You know, Standard right now has a whole bunch of creatures that are either 2/3 or 3/3s because of Collected Company, while Avacyn just kind of puts a block on all of those really well. And this doesn't even take into account the fact that she can transform and just wreak havoc.
Yeah, this is all without the flip even in consideration. It's just a really strong Sarah Angel. You get the indestructible effect, and as you said, with her being bigger than everything else and flying, she kind of is a combination of Mantis Rider and Sylvan Advocate, because you get a large creature with Vigilance with Sylvan Advocate. You get a flying creature with Vigilance with Mantis Rider.
Right. I'm pretty excited, even though I'm not the type of person that likes attacking with creatures very much. I'd like to play some sort of a control variant with her and Archangel of Tides. And a 3/5 Angel that kind of blockades a lot of things.
You had me at Archangel of Tithes.
Yeah. To a degree, it doesn't synergize because they're both angels, but that's kind of irrelevant when they both have big bodies and they fly, and they put a stop to aggressive strategies, which I'm sure we're going to see with, zombies and vampires that, if I had to guess, would be less than 3/3s.
If I had to guess, I'd say most zombies are going to be 2/2s.
Right. And who knows what vampires will end up growing to, but the cool thing that's going to happen to Standard is we're going to lose the 3-4 color format with all these fetch lands, and things are going to drop down probably to a 2-color format. So I can see these white angel decks, splashing blue or green because you have duels that support that, be pretty effective.
I would definitely play an angel deck.
Yep.
Well, it looks like it's going to be red-white angels based on what we've seen so far with
Oh, yeah.
Avacyn being red-white, and we've had some red angels and some white angels already.
Well, don't forget, you don't have to put Avacyn in a deck that has red.
That is true. You don't have to put her in a deck that has red. Like there was some talk about putting her in a deck with Nantuko Husk so she could flip immediately.
Hey, that's fun.
Ooh, that is good. All right, so moving from standard to modern, there are quite a few cards that could make an impact on modern, but I want to hint at Vessel of Volatility. I believe I'm saying that correctly.
This card is a card that I am not excited about for modern, and I think I know where you're going with this.
Well, why is that? Why aren't you excited?
So most people see this card and they go, it's going to be great in Storm. And as a Storm player, I'm just kind of like, meh.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's fair, because it's definitely not a Desperate Ritual or a Pyretic Ritual, because those cards, you pump X amount of mana into it and you get X+1 back. What I like about Vessel is it functions almost identically to a Pentad Prism in that it stores mana for a later use. And if you play Vessel on turn 2, just like if you play Pentad Prism on turn 2, then on turn 3, when you decide to use it, you have your 3 lands plus the mana that it generates, which will total up to 5. And one of the best cards that cost 5 mana is Through the Breach.
Ooh.
What works well with Through the Breach?
I feel ya.
So this might be a big player in Modern just because it offers redundancy alongside Pentad Prism. I don't know what else offers that effect of going from turn 2 store to turn 3. Now we have Through the Breach, aside from janky Simian Spirit Guides and ritual type effects.
Yeah, that's an angle that I didn't expect with Vessel. Because everybody sees Vessel and they go, oh, it makes mana, it goes into Storm. And I'm just kind of like, no. But that's definitely a use where you can just surprise people. Like, I hear turn 3 Emrakul is probably pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
You think so?
I hear it's good in Legacy, so who knows?
I hear it's great when he has haste, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What about any other modern bombs you're thinking about?
The last ones that I have, these kind of pair up together. One of the first modern decks I hopped back into, about a year ago, was the Taking Turns list. Just mono blue, play your Howling Mines and your Dictates, and then play as many Time Warp effects as you can fit in your deck. Well, they just spoiled a new card. I believe it's Fevered Visions that has that same function of Howling Mine, where you draw more than one card a turn.
Oh, that card.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to understand exactly how this card's going to function in comparison, because...
You draw at the end step.
Right.
And then if you're an opponent, you take 2.
And the taking 2 damage I'm not interested in, but it's the drawing at the end step that I am. So imagine on turn 3, if you pass the turn and then play Dictate at the end of their turn, on your turn 4, you're going to be up a card, right? You've just gained a free card because Dictate drew you one, and your opponent didn't end up with one. But with Fevered Visions, you can play it on turn 3, you're immediately up a card, even though you can't quite use it. Your opponent gets to take their entire turn, but they're not going to have access to that card until they're done. So chances are that's not going to hurt you very much, aside from, Abrupt Decay. And then you get to take your turn again, play your 4th land, and again, pass to draw another card. So this synergizes very well with the second card, Engulf the Shore, which is an instant Spoiled in Shadows that bounces creatures based on the number of islands you have, right?
Yeah.
And so if turn 3 you can tap out for Fevered Visions, and then turn 4 you get a whole +2 cards to cast an instant like Cryptic Command or Engulf the Shore, that's kind of like a Time Walk. Or it can be more so because you use it on their combat step. I don't know how big of an impact it'll be, but any sort of extra tool that you can throw to an existing deck, I think, is worth looking into.
It's really hard to break into Modern with a new deck unless you just break the format wide open like the Eldrazi just did.
Right.
Or when you win a Grand Prix with an unknown Modern deck that's centered around $1 or less artifacts.
Cards you forget about.
My favorite kind of decks.
Oh, yeah. So now it's my turn. I'm going to talk about what I'm excited about for Shadows over Innistrad. I've already given plenty of time to myself staring at a microphone talking about this, but there's a little bit more to talk about. So I'm going to start off by saying I geeked out over clue tokens and flavor text on the clue tokens last time. But I thought I'd mention that there's now a second clue token with its own unique artwork, as well as its own flavor text.
If you missed it, they actually spoiled the rest of the tokens today, and there are 6 clue tokens.
Oh, no, I did not see that while I was at work today. So that's really cool. It's six different artworks, 6 different quotes from Tamio's journal?
Yep, 6 different artworks, 6 different quotes. One of them is Avacyn's symbol. Tamio's like, why did it change? One is a broken stained glass of Evilson, of Avacyn with the red blood on her hair. There's another one which is Markov Manor, and I'm trying to remember what the 4th one that we haven't mentioned, or the last one that we haven't mentioned is.
Well, Markov Manor was one of the escape rooms, so maybe they're going with that theme.
Yeah, it was one of the escape rooms, but I'm trying to remember what it is, but I can't think of what the last one is. But there are half a dozen of these clue tokens pointing us in all different directions.
Okay, so I've said it before, I'll say it again, as I'm getting into what I'm excited for Shadows over Innistrad. I love Investigate Clue Synergy. As you said, the Bloodborne, the card, Daring Sleuth, is all about Investigate Clue Synergy. So I don't know if I'll have time or resources to play Standard this time around. I only played Ramp because it appealed to me. It had commons in it, it had uncommons. It was relatively cheap. But I'm considering, maybe, for Friday Night Magic only, considering making a janky clue deck with Gear Up or Aether Grid.
Oh, yes.
It seems like a little bit of fun. Just a little bit.
Get Mom and Dad in there, get the Whirler Rogue in there.
Oh yeah, of course. What would I not put in there? I mean, I'd even put Hangerback Walker in there. All kinds of... I mean, you can tap the clue tokens for Whirler Rogue.
By the way, the last clue token is a Bloodied Angel Feather.
I'm geeking out over this stuff. Clues are so awesome. So I'm going to move on. Avacyn's Judgment, as you said, is really, really versatile. It could fit in with an Aggressive Madness deck if you really need to get some tempo going. You discard it, you pay the X in the red, and then you destroy some stuff before you attack. That potentially could take care of a pesky angel. Could also be a finisher. Swing in and then discard Avacyn's Judgment with X equals kill. That could be fun. Then there's Trishkai Decaphobia.
This card.
Oh, this card.
Oh.
So cool. Not only is the flavor absolutely perfect on this, for those of you not in the know, this is a card centered around a fear of the number 13, and it is, I believe, 3 and a black enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you choose one of 2 things. Both of them start with every player whose life total is 13 loses the game, but one of them is and every other player gains 1 life, and the other effect is and every other player loses 1 life. So this is going to be a multiplayer all-star because you can manipulate everyone's life totals either up or down each turn, and everyone's jockeying not to be caught at 13 life on your upkeep. That just seems like there's a lot of fun to be had there.
Hidetsugu Second Right Part 2.
I also like these enchantments that do weird things involving life totals and losing the game on your upkeep, such as Demonic Pact, but now we have Trishka Decaphobia. I was looking at the Planeswalkers, and Sword and Jace stuck out to me as far as being interesting to me, because yes, it's very obvious that the Werewolf Planeswalker Arlen Court is going to be just a house. That's beyond question here. But I really wanted the new Sorin to do more for 6 mana. Because its plus is you draw a card and you're revealing it when you do, and then your opponent loses life equal to its converted mana cost. Could be a land, it could fizzle. Got kind of the Karanos flavor there a little bit. And then the minus is basically a Pharikis Cure for X. But I do think he's going to see plenty of play. Because if you're ahead, you can draw a card when you drop him, and that could help you win the game immediately. If you're behind, you can gain some life and maybe hold on to Sorin for another turn. That becomes the problem, though. It's not quite the same thing as Chandra, just kind of minus X wipe the board. Sorin is minus X to 1 thing. Let's say you're facing 2 2/2s and you're at 2 life. You could just minus 4 on one of the 2/2s and just have overflow damage and gain that much more life and not lose on the swing back. So there's plenty of things you can do with Sorin. Just for 6 mana, it seemed like he wasn't doing quite enough. What did you guys think about flooding the board with vampires, though?
I like how it's kind of a different Ajani.
Oh, yeah. Or, either Ajani. Like, there's the one that makes the avatar, and there's the Ajani that just gives the 100 life.
Well, there's also the other Ajani, Color of the Pride, whose ultimate is make 2/2 cats equal to your life total.
That is true. So imagine all that together. These vampires do have lifelink. That could be fun.
Yep.
That could actually save you from dying as well, if you just need things to block. So then I was looking at the Jace, and the new Jace is actually pretty sleek. I kind of hate the 5 mana, but then I hated the 6 mana on Elspeth, and I was wrong about that. So you could really angle some advantage with Jace. You could afford 2 bounces, assuming nothing bad happens to him in the meantime, before you have to start using the plus ability. And at that point, you can stabilize, and then you can start doing the Scry 1 draw a card. That's really strong and really good for stabilizing if you're playing Control Zac.
Yep, I've already had my eye on this guy.
I fully expect him to see tons of play, especially after Flip Jace rotates out. And that's not to mention what happens when you combine his ultimate with Rule of Law, which is players can only cast 1 spell a turn.
Or Arcane Laboratory, or Eidolon of Rhetoric.
Oh yeah. Imagine what we're going to see as people start to brew in Eternal formats. That's all the cards I'm excited for that have been spoiled in the past week or so. I mean, I've had plenty of time, as I've said, in front of a microphone geeking out over this, but those handful of cards are really exciting, and I'm going to make some sort of Thopter's Investigate deck where I can tap clue tokens to deal damage. That's just awesome. So let's get to our community question. What is your favorite ability in Shadows over Innistrad? We're talking Delirium, Investigate, Madness, Skulk, or Transform. And you guys get to answer as well, and then we're going to await answers from the community on this question. John, favorite ability in the set?
I think with my introduction to the SOI spoilers kind of gave it away. It's Delirium. It's probably not going to be the most powerful mechanic, but it's the one that I just love the flavor of. I love the story that the cards tell with Delirium. It's just great.
Zac, what about you?
Oh man, I like a lot of them, but Skulk caught my eye immediately just because, I mean, it's simple, just like this creature can't be blocked, but it just kind of has that creepiness to it, like creeping up on you, hidden attack type thing.
And with all these new blocks that they've had since the previous Innistrad, where they started doing top-down design, they really were ramping up as far as getting the flavor in the text of the cards. And we had things like extort. Extort was a cool keyword.
Monstrosity.
Oh yeah, monstrosity was a really good one.
Heroic.
Heroic was a good one. There was a few others in Ravnica because there was one for each guild. There was
Blood Rush.
Oh yeah, Blood Rush was pretty descriptive.
I was a big fan of Overload.
Oh
Overload,
yeah. You got the little device on your wrist maybe, and you set it to overload with the dial, and then everything explodes, that kind of thing. But there's so many words that they've used, but not until this set has it really, like, this set feels like where they've been headed. Delirium, Madness, Skulk. I mean, Madness has already been a thing, but to throw it in with the rest of these, it really works. And Investigate even. I mean, Magnifying Glass. Transform's not really, it's not really a flavor word, but the idea of transforming is cool. They're really hitting it out of the park with the flavor here. I mean, we had so much story in the previous 2 sets that they didn't really have time for giving us keywords that were so descriptive. It was Landfall, which was cool, and Eldrazi and everything, Devoid. But man, Skulk and Delirium?
It works really, really well.
I would have to say my favorite ability in Shadows of Innistrad, I'm not sure. Maybe Investigate. maybe sacrificing clue tokens. I don't know. Maybe. Something like that.
You and Marshall can go have a clue party over in the corner.
Okay, Marshall, let's have a clue party. We'll get a clue. And now that I've made a pun at Marshall Sutcliffe, I'm in good company. I guess that means that we have to call it a day. So here's what we're going to do. John, you get to say your farewell, followed by Zac since he's the senior guest, and then I'll say my farewell and we'll be out of here.
All right. Well, you can find me at jwiley129 on Twitter. You can also get in contact with me via the Eyes on the Mise podcast. It is at Eyes on the Mise. It sounds exactly as it's spelled. Mise spelled M-I-S-E. We also recently set up a Gmail of eyesonthemise@gmail.com if you have any questions about the podcast there.
And you can find me on Twitter at UTDZac, Z-A-C. I'm pretty active on there as far as replying. A lot of people tend to have questions on some of the work that I do, and I enjoy posting the crazy decks that I work on up there, asking for suggestions. So if you've got any, please let me know.
Oh, I'll let you know. I think Clue Tokens is the new card that Lantern needs. No, I'm just kidding. And I am Joseph Dunlap. executive producer of Draw 4 Podcasts, founder of the new 10-minute Magic podcast format, which you'll find on ManaLink.com, and I'm a featured writer for ManaLink.com. This has been Draw 4 Podcasts. Until next time, we wish you good fortune, and may you draw well.